Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a time when Mondays weren't just annoying, they were allegedly fatal. You're waking up in a medieval village, cold morning air nipping at your nose through the gaps in your thatched roof. The church bell rings in the distance, slow, somber, and suspiciously grim for the start of the week. Your joints ache, your bread is stale, and worst of all, everyone around you seems convinced that this day, Monday, might kill you. Not figuratively, literally. You rub your eyes with the scratchy hem of your tunic and sit up on your lumpy straw mattress. There's no coffee waiting, no alarm to snooze, just the sense that something is deeply wrong. A superstition hangs in the air like chimney smoke. Children are unusually quiet. Animals seem restless, and you overhear your neighbor mutter that his cousin died last Monday. And the Monday before that, someone's cow dropped dead. You start to wonder, is this just a string of bad luck? Or is Monday actually cursed? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Drop your location and time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slip outside, stepping into muddy lanes, and hear the chatter of villagers who look downright haunted. They say the devil walks freely on Mondays, that spirits stir more easily, and that anyone foolish enough to tempt fate, say, by starting a journey or signing a contract, is practically begging to end up face down in a ditch by Tuesday. In the medieval imagination, the calendar wasn't just a schedule. It was a spiritual battlefield. And Mondays, it seemed, were the front line. Some believed Mondays were cursed because they marked the first full day after the Sabbath, and thus were when sin crept back in. Others thought Monday was Moon's Day. Yes, the day named for the moon, tying it to lunar moods and madness. You shuffle past the baker, who's crossing himself 3 times before lighting his oven. He tells you, eyes darting sideways, that bread tends to fall flat on Mondays. His mother once said, it's because demons lick the loaves before they rise. You're not sure whether to laugh or skip breakfast. One mainstream belief rooted in Christian doctrine was that since God rested on the 7th day, Sunday, humans were meant to re-enter the world of toil with Monday. Thus, any resistance to it was seen as spiritual weakness. But ironically, Monday also became the scapegoat for everything that went wrong. Now, here's a quirk. Some records from the 14th century suggest Monday was statistically more deadly than other days. For executions, courts often resumed after the weekend, and gallows, being communal entertainment, needed a fresh start. Nothing like a hanging to kick off your week. Historians still argue whether this reputation was merely anecdotal or reinforced by coincidental timing. Was it confirmation bias? Or did people really die more often on Mondays? After all, Mondays were prime days for travel, market deals, and dangerous labor to resume. All high-risk activities in a time when tripping on a loose cobblestone could mean death by infected toe. As you head toward the village green, you see a small shrine has been set up. A simple cross, a wilted garland, and a muddy boot. Someone died this morning, apparently after milking a goat. Natural causes? Probably. But it's Monday, so whispers start flying. He should have waited until Tuesday, says one older woman with a knowing nod. Your stomach rumbles. But when you approach the tavern, the innkeeper hesitates to open the door. Not serving hot ale till noon, he mutters. Bad luck to tap a barrel on a Monday morning. It's enough to make you want to crawl back into bed. except your bed is made of straw and shared with 2 fleas and a spider the size of a walnut. What really seals the mood is the bell again, this time from the church tower. It rings not to announce Mass, but something more somber. Protective peal, someone says, keeps the spirits from following us into the work week. The sound is off-kilter, like someone is half-heartedly trying to tune a broken xylophone. But it works. Kind of. You think? As the sun climbs higher and villagers begin to reluctantly engage with their tools and chores, you realize something else. It's not just fear. There's a rhythm to this collective dread, like a ritual. It binds people together in their shared apprehension. There's comfort in knowing everyone else hates Mondays too, even if they think it might actually kill them. So, as you gather herbs for the apothecary or pretend to sweep straw from a stone floor, keep one ear tuned to those murmurs. He shouldn't have gone hunting today. I told her not to wash clothes this morning. You couldn't pay me to touch a spinning wheel till Tuesday. And maybe, just maybe, you'll make it to sundown without any mysterious accidents. Fingers crossed. The sun has barely crept past the tops of the thatched roofs when you feel a tap on your shoulder. It's Elric, the local tanner, his hands forever stained the color of dried blood and irony. He whispers, "You heard about the miller's boy, didn't you? You haven't, but you don't need to. It's Monday. Of course something terrible has happened." Elric leans in. He tried to sharpen the grindstone this morning. Blade slipped, took off half his thumb. You wince. Elric nods solemnly, like he's delivering an ancient truth. Mondays are no time for sharp objects. You want to ask if there's any day where losing a thumb is fine, but you hold back. You're starting to get it. The Monday curse isn't about logic. It's about pattern. And in medieval life, where medicine meant leeches and luck ruled everything, pattern was all they had. The blacksmith nearby is hammering slower than usual. You notice he's wearing a sprig of rosemary tucked into his shirt collar, which he believes wards off Monday misfortunes. Keeps the spirits confused, he explains, wiping sweat from his brow with a glove so filthy it could be legally declared a new species. They can't count the days when you smell like a roast. That's the thing. In a time without consistent calendars, the villagers didn't just mark days, they felt them. Mondays had a texture. Colder, heavier, jittery. People had their Monday rituals and you start to recognize them. One family refuses to light any fire until after midday. Another won't touch cold iron. And Bertha, who's either a cunning woman or just extremely bored, insists you spit in your shoe before putting it on. Left foot first, obviously. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Many medieval workers were actually allowed Mondays off. It was called Saint Monday, an informal tradition mostly observed by urban tradesmen who extended their Sunday drinking into a 2-day hangover recovery. Which, let's be honest, sounds more like modern self-care than a spiritual rite. But this only adds to the paradox. While some feared Mondays, others treated them as a blessed excuse to stay in bed. Historians still argue whether Saint Monday was born of piety or just really bad hangovers. Maybe both. Maybe every superstition starts with someone nursing a headache and blaming the moon. And yes, the moon. It casts a pale light even now, retreating reluctantly from the dawn. Since Monday derives from Moon's Day, many medieval minds linked it to lunacy, literally. They believed the moon influenced humors, moods, and misfortune. So of course, Monday, being moon-ruled, was thought to amplify chaos. One fringe belief claimed that if you bled someone on a Monday, their soul might leak out with the blood. That's why barber surgeons avoided it, though you can't help but feel that's just good general policy. Losing your soul over a leeching session feels like a customer service nightmare. You pass by the village well, where two women are whispering while drawing water. Don't drink the first bucket on Monday, one warns. That's when the dead send back their reflections. You glance down into the dark surface. It's just water. But your own face looks weirdly tired. Maybe that's just you. Or maybe it's Monday. Quirky customs like these dotted the medieval week, but Monday bore the brunt of them. You're told not to clip your nails, not to trim your hair, not to sing. Singing on a Monday might wake the wrong kind of spirit. One that doesn't enjoy folk songs and isn't shy about saying so, usually by curdling your goat milk. You wander into the chapel, partly out of curiosity, partly for a change of temperature. The priest is lighting candles with a hand that trembles slightly. He says a short prayer, one not found in any official book, and then spits 3 times behind the altar. Just tradition, he says, for safety. You nod politely, because nothing about this day seems safe. Even economic decisions were touched by the Monday phobia. Some merchants refused to open stalls on the first day of the week, believing it jinxed their profits. In towns where market day was Monday, there were extra blessings, more incense, and double the holy water. It's like rolling the dice with divine insurance. As you return to the village green, a child is being scolded for whistling. That'll call the changelings, someone says. You watch as the kid, thoroughly unbothered, eats a handful of berries and kicks a rock. Children, it seems, have always been immune to both logic and curses. And yet, you begin to feel something odd. Comfort. Because in this landscape of dirt and dread, there's something beautiful about people building invisible protections. Superstitions, for all their absurdity, are shields, handmade, heartfelt shields against the random cruelty of life. The cobbler gives you a nod and a quiet warning. If you dream of crows on Monday night, wear your shoes backward on Tuesday. Keeps the fever away. You nod back, because now you're invested. If someone told you to sleep with garlic in your ears, you might actually consider it. And finally, as the sun reaches its highest point, a strange sort of calm settles over the village. Maybe it's relief. Maybe it's resignation. The worst hasn't happened, yet, but you sense that people will spend the rest of the day in a low-grade hum of tension, avoiding ladders, rushing through chores, and checking their shadows twice. You find a spot near a tree and sit down, letting the breeze tease your hair and the quiet buzz of insects lull you. Monday isn't over. It could still strike, but you've made it this far, and honestly, that's a win. You stretch your legs under the shade of that gnarled ash tree, half watching a pair of hens squabble over something unspeakable in the dust. It's just past midday, and while the fear of Mondays hasn't lifted entirely, people begin to uncoil just a little, like someone's eased a tight string. Still, a few villagers glance at the sky more often than they should, as if waiting for it to fall. It's around this time you notice something peculiar. No one is baking today. Not one hearth smells of warm bread. You ask around, and the answer always circles back to the same chilling phrase: you don't bake on Monday. The dough won't rise. The dead won't let it. Apparently, the belief was that on Mondays, bread could trap the spirits of the restless, those who died with unfinished business or unpaid debts. Bake a loaf today, and you might slice into something more than yeast. And let's face it, no one wants a haunted crouton. Some fringe traditions even held that baking on a Monday might anger Saint Honoré, the patron saint of bakers. Although, to be fair, Historians still argue whether this is rooted in genuine religious fear or just an excellent excuse to skip the hardest chore of the week. Sorry, can't need ghosts. And it doesn't stop with bread. Monday was considered inauspicious for a whole list of activities. Want to start a journey? Don't. That road you take might lead you somewhere you weren't meant to go. Farmers avoided planting anything on Mondays, especially beans, thought to stir up buried anger in the soil, whatever that means. Even marriages were off limits. Tie the knot on a Monday, and legend says you'd be cursed to argue before every full moon. Though frankly, that sounds like most relationships. As you wander through the fields beyond the village, the landscape seems quieter than usual. No one is tilling, plowing, or turning earth. The only sounds are the cawing of crows overhead and the occasional distant whinny of a horse that probably also wishes it were still asleep. You spot a shepherd leaning on his crook, whittling a small wooden charm in the shape of a fish. To keep the Monday devils away, he tells you. They don't like water creatures. You nod slowly. This logic is tenuous at best, but the charm is pretty. He offers you one, calls it a sleep fish, and insists you hang it above your bed tonight. Just in case, he says with a wink, before turning back to his flock, who seem as indifferent to Monday curses as the hens back in the village. Back on the dirt path, you pass a cottage where someone has scrawled a circle of ash around their doorstep. It's Monday, after all, and ash was believed to confuse evil spirits. The logic was that demons travel in straight lines, very German-engineered of them, so circles threw off their navigation. Historians still debate whether this was spiritual geometry or just soot-based anxiety. Speaking of spirits, one of the eerier beliefs you hear today is that Mondays are the easiest days for the dead to cross back over. Thin veils, weak walls, pick your favorite metaphor. And while there's no medieval census of ghost sightings, anecdotal tales abound. There's the story of a weaver who opened her window to air out the linens one Monday morning and heard her dead husband whisper, "You folded the wrong way." Or the tale of the miller's widow, who swore she saw spectral footprints in flour every Monday for a year. Maybe she just needed a cat. Or maybe the flour remembered. Of course, some of this superstition comes down to power. Who had it and who didn't? In a time when the church shaped daily life and few people could read, Monday superstitions gave peasants a sense of control. You couldn't change the tax collector's schedule, but you could refuse to mend your socks on a Monday. Power, in its smallest form, tucked inside rituals. And it's not all fear and doom. You find a grandmother near the edge of the woods collecting herbs, something you've heard is strictly taboo on a Monday. She shrugs. The spirits don't bother the brave, she says, pocketing a bunch of nettle and chewing on something minty. You like her. She tells you that her mother used to make Monday tea, a sleepy brew of linden, chamomile, and crushed violet, meant to soothe whatever emotional madness the moon stirred up. Whether it was real magic or just warm water and nostalgia, she couldn't say. But we never cried after drinking it, she adds. You wonder if Starbucks could rebrand that. And just as you begin to think maybe this day isn't all bad, you step in something deeply unidentifiable and definitely organic. A pig nearby grunts approvingly. Monday strikes again. By late afternoon, the atmosphere shifts subtly. A black cat, yes, really, wanders into the square, and 3 people simultaneously turn around, spit over their left shoulders, and touch iron. You try to do the same, but you've only got one rusty nail in your pouch and a bad aim. Still, effort counts, right? You sit at the edge of the fountain, staring into the rippling water, and reflect. For all the irrationality of Monday fear, there's something deeply human about it. It gives structure to chaos. It lets people blame something when the inexplicable happens. A superstition is just a story we tell ourselves to make sense of a senseless world. The bells in the chapel begin to toll slowly, one for each hour remaining until dusk. People move a bit faster, eager to wrap up their Monday business before true nightfall. You watch as shutters are closed, candles lit early, and one man tosses a handful of salt at his door just in case. And as you rise and stretch your legs again, you realize that Monday hasn't killed anyone today. Yet. But the sun still has a little way to go. As the sun begins its slow descent, stretching amber light across the fields, you follow the sound of bells down a slope toward a modest stone chapel. The kind of place that smells like damp wood, wax, and old confessions. A few figures move quietly inside, some lighting candles, others mumbling prayers under their breath. It's Monday evening, and while the village is done with work, the superstitions are just getting started. You sit near the back, where the pews creak like old bones, and watch a woman carefully unroll a piece of cloth. It's embroidered with strange symbols, a tangle of stars, keys, and something that might be a hedgehog. She ties it around her wrist and whispers something about warding off the Monday bite. You're not sure what that is, but it doesn't sound like a good time. Here's the thing. In medieval times, people believed that Mondays didn't just bring bad luck. They were prime time for ill humors. You know, those ancient bodily fluids people thought controlled everything from mood to mortality. Blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Mondays were believed to stir the black bile. The moody, brooding, don't talk to me until I've had my mead type. So if someone was irritable, sluggish, or prone to philosophical rants about sheep taxes, it was just the Monday melancholy working its way through their system. Doctors of the era, if we're being generous with the word doctor, would prescribe all sorts of remedies, leeching, purging, or occasionally just smacking someone with a wet herb bundle. No one liked that last one. Historians still argue whether these treatments were more medicinal or symbolic. Was the leech actually believed to draw out bad humors? Or was it more like hitting Ctrl+Alt+Delete on a person's body? Either way, it rarely improved someone's mood. You lean your head back against the cool stone wall, and a soft hush falls over the room. Then the priest steps forward, not for a sermon, but for what the villagers call the Monday warding. It's not officially sanctioned by the church, of course, but in places like this, local customs tend to blend with liturgy in wonderfully weird ways. He sprinkles a little salt near the threshold and rings a small bell 3 times, one for the mind, one for the body, and one for the livestock. You almost giggle at that last bit, but then remember that in this world, losing a cow is like losing a car, a fridge, and half your savings account all at once. Outside, dusk thickens. You step out and nearly bump into a boy who's frantically rubbing a lump of iron across his forehead. For protection, he says. Mondays twist dreams into nightmares. He then adds, not unkindly, you should sleep facing east. The bad ones can't follow the sunrise. You smile, partly charmed, partly concerned. But it does make you wonder. Why was Monday so tied to dreams? According to a surviving herbal text, likely copied and recopied by monks with very questionable penmanship, Monday-born dreams were said to predict betrayal, illness, or a sudden loss of cheese. Yes, really. Cheese theft was serious business. Some fringe beliefs even suggested that dreams dreamt on a Monday were not your own at all. Instead, they were borrowed from the recently dead. People would wake up remembering lives that weren't theirs, fighting battles, birthing twins, or falling from a tower, and spend the whole day feeling haunted by someone else's memory. You know, your standard medieval Monday. You pass a row of cottages where window shutters are closed tight despite the pleasant breeze. The smell of sage and burnt rosemary drifts lazily in the air. Herbal smoke was often used to purify the home on Mondays. Not because it worked, though it smelled delightful, but because the act itself was comforting. Rituals, even odd ones, give a shape to anxiety. Near the well, you spot a bundle of dried lavender and thistle tied with red thread. "For clarity," says a passing girl, "so you don't forget who you are on a Monday." She skips off before you can ask if that's a common problem. And maybe it is. Imagine living in a world where daylight is precious, death is frequent, and most people you know are missing at least one tooth. If Mondays seem like a spiritual hazard course, maybe they were. Maybe the start of the week was less about to-do lists and more about survival. You climb a small hill at the village edge, where a circle of standing stones watches the land like silent sentries. One stone has a faint engraving, a pair of eyes and the word Lunamord, moon death. You run your fingers across the letters, now barely visible after centuries of rain and worry. Legends claim that once a year, a Monday would fall under a twisted moon, where those who lied on that day would lose their shadow for a fortnight. No one could agree what that meant exactly, but everyone agreed you didn't want to find out. From the hill, you see the first stars blooming in the indigo sky. Back in the village, lights flicker behind curtains. Monday night rituals are underway. Bread tucked under pillows to absorb nightmares, shoes turned backward by the door to confuse spirits, and one particularly strange tradition where people toss 3 beans over their roof while reciting the names of their least favorite relatives. No one remembers why. They just do it. You turn toward the forest again, the edge of your path lit by moonlight and imagination. A soft rustle to your left reminds you that not all Monday myths are man-made. Some involve animals. Bats, for instance, were seen as unlucky omens on Mondays, especially if one flew into your house and landed near anything made of silver. Or worse, if you saw a fox walking backwards on a Monday, it meant a death would come to the village by week's end. Historians still debate whether this was truly believed or just an elaborate prank by very creative children. As you descend the hill, the hush of night wraps around you like a thick, warm cloak. The temperature drops, but the air feels clearer, lighter. It's strange. Somehow, surviving another Monday feels like a tiny victory, like you've outwitted a very lazy trickster god. And as you approach your small rented cottage, you find something unexpected on the doorstep. A tiny fish charm tied with string. Looks like the shepherd remembered you after all. You step inside, hang it above your bed, and exhale slowly. If the spirits come, at least you've got company. You wake to the rhythmic thump of wooden wheels outside, followed by a faint chorus of sheep bleating their way down the main path. The sky is still a sleepy shade of gray-blue, but the village is already stretching awake. Monday might be superstitious, but Tuesday? Tuesday is when people get weird about cause and consequence. You rub the sleep from your eyes, swing your legs over the bed, and nearly step on your fish charm, still dangling, still doing its protective duties, presumably. You pad outside where the air smells of dew, chimney smoke, and mild regret. A baker is sweeping ash from his oven while muttering about Monday carryovers, whatever those are. In the medieval mind, Tuesday wasn't just Tuesday. It was the day things manifest. You'd paid the price on Monday. Now Tuesday shows you the receipt. If your bread didn't rise today, it was because you insulted someone's grandmother yesterday. If your cow went cross-eyed, well, maybe you forgot to sprinkle salt before bed. Actions had consequences, but they rarely felt direct. You make your way to the village green, where a woman is inspecting her cabbage patch, like it just insulted her lineage. She's shaking her head, poking the soil. "They're growing wrong," she says, without looking up. "It's Tuesday." You nod solemnly, because apparently that explains everything. Historically, Tuesday was associated with Mars, the god of war, and while peasants weren't reading Roman mythology over breakfast, the influence filtered down. Tuesday was about confrontation, whether physical, social, or spiritual. It's the day of petty arguments, snapped strings, broken buckets, and inexplicable chicken fights. Yes, those were a thing. One town even passed a temporary ban on letting roosters out before noon on Tuesdays. Some fringe beliefs went further. A 13th century folk charm advised never to look directly into a mirror on a Tuesday morning, or else risk seeing your future wife as she dies. Romantic. And also wildly unsettling at 7 a.m. Historians still argue whether these Tuesday taboos were invented to discourage vanity, or if people genuinely feared being spooked by a bit of glass. The truth probably lives somewhere between fear and boredom. Back on the green, a man in an oversized tunic is carefully balancing a jug of milk on his head. You watch as he takes 3 deliberate steps, then abruptly stops. "Testing Tuesday," he explains, not unkindly. "The weight tells me if the week will go well." The jug wobbles. Not great. You stroll past the blacksmith's hut, where the apprentice is hammering with an odd rhythm. 4 taps, then 1 backward clang on the anvil. It sounds accidental, but it's not. "Keeps misfortune off the blade," the smith says. "Tuesday metals warp if you don't confuse the spirits." You wonder if the spirits are as easily baffled as people think. Mid-morning arrives, and with it, a burst of commotion near the old mill. A man is claiming his shadow has disappeared. "Vanished right off me," he insists, spinning slowly in place as villagers gawk. "Look, not a smudge." He's mostly ignored. But then someone remembers the legend about Monday lies erasing shadows by Tuesday. A few people suddenly seem nervous. It's an odd belief, this idea that truth spoken on Tuesday binds tighter than on other days. Contracts were best signed on Wednesdays, but curses? Curses took best on Tuesdays. The belief was so strong that some people wouldn't speak certain names aloud that day, especially not the names of enemies, unbaptized children, or tax collectors, the third group being the most feared. You duck into the apothecary's hut for a moment of warmth. Shelves are lined with glass jars and dried herbs, most labeled in a handwriting only decipherable by medieval monks or modern pharmacists. A small girl is buying a sprig of rosemary, not for cooking, but to stop her brother from dreaming of wolves. The apothecary smiles at you and explains, "Tuesday is when dreams start to cling. If you had a nightmare last night, don't talk about it, or you'll invite it back the next evening. Or worse, share it." Nothing like passing along a dream about snakes under your skin to really spice up family dinner. You thank her and step back into the sun, which now glints off a wagon loaded with hay and 2 loudly arguing farmers. Something about goats. Something about whose field has more moon in it, whatever that means. The kind of argument that can only erupt when 2 people have held a grudge since last solstice and Tuesday finally gives them an excuse. And yet, beneath all the tension and ritual, Tuesday holds a strange promise. If something goes wrong, you can blame the unseen. If something goes right, it must be because you were clever enough to outwit the rules. A local boy runs by, laughing, a pine cone tied to a string behind him like a dragging tail. He shouts over his shoulder, "If it turns left 3 times, your wish comes true." You're not sure where that came from, but you find yourself watching. The pine cone bumps over stones, spins once, then again, and on the 3rd turn, it flips onto its side. The boy gasps. It almost did it. That means something big is almost going to happen. That, right there, is peak medieval Tuesday. Nothing concrete, but everything charged with potential. You walk back through the village just as a woman pours a little wine onto the earth. "For balance," she murmurs. "Can't let Tuesday take more than it gives." You wonder how many people whisper to the dirt, hoping it hears. As night approaches, the anxiety lifts slightly. Tuesday is leaving after all. You light a small candle and set it near your window. That's not tradition. You just like the glow. But a passing stranger nods approvingly. "Smart," he says. "Light keeps the after echoes out." You don't ask what those are. You close the shutters, stretch out on your bed, and let your body soften into the mattress. Somewhere outside, someone is humming. A dog barks twice, then settles. The candle flickers, a little beacon against a very old and very peculiar kind of darkness. Tuesdays might bring trouble, but they also remind you that in a world without science, textbooks, or weather apps, people still tried to make sense of cause and effect, with pine cones, mirror taboos, and the occasional misplaced goat. And sometimes, that effort alone is enough to make sense of the week. You wake on Wednesday morning to the faint hum of the village waking up. Distant roosters, a cart rattling over cobblestones, the occasional bark of a dog with important business. But you know today is different. It's Wednesday, the day when promises are supposed to be kept, contracts signed, and oaths sworn with utmost seriousness. At least, that's how the medieval mind saw it. You slip on your woolen slippers and shuffle outside, brushing away a scattering of frost from the doorstep. The sky is a wash of soft gray, the kind that makes your breath curl in the air. Already people are gathering near the market square, clutching papers and murmuring about God's witness and the binding word. You pause to watch as a group of men and women negotiate the terms of a deal so carefully that it feels like they're handling fragile eggs. In medieval times, Wednesday was named after Woden or Odin, the Norse god of wisdom, magic, and notably, oaths. His day was the most serious day of the week to make a promise. "Swear on Wednesday," villagers would say, "and you'd better mean it." Breaking an oath signed on Wednesday wasn't just dishonorable. It could bring down curses, loss of reputation, or worse. You follow the crowd to the village hall where an elderly scribe is dipping his quill into ink, preparing to witness a marriage contract. His eyes twinkle with a secret knowledge, a hint of the superstitions wrapped around this day. He mutters that no contracts made on Wednesday should be annulled before the next full moon, or else the spirit of Woden would haunt the wrongdoers. You wonder what kind of haunting that might be, but the scribe just grins and says, "You don't want to find out." This seriousness contrasts sharply with a more peculiar tradition, the Wednesday whisper. At noon, it was said that one could speak a secret into the ear of a stranger, and the secret would remain safe forever, unless you heard a crow caw afterward. If the crow cawed, your secret was doomed to be spilled within a fortnight. You spot a young woman nervously whispering to a stooped traveler by the well. The traveler listens intently, then nods and disappears into the crowd. The woman glances skyward, waiting for a crow, but none arrives. Historians still argue whether the Wednesday Whisper was a coded social tool to share forbidden information or simply a charming myth born out of the human love for intrigue. Either way, it was enough to make people lower their voices and glance over their shoulders every Wednesday. As you wander past the blacksmith's forge, the rhythmic pounding of hammer on anvil feels almost ritualistic. The smith tells you that metal forged on Wednesday is stronger, especially if it's shaped during the hour of the wolf, an obscure time when superstition said the veil between worlds thinned. You ask about the hour of the wolf, and he shrugs. Not exactly on the clock, more like when the night feels restless. You pass the baker's shop, where the scent of fresh bread mingles with a faint tang of rosemary and thyme. The baker is explaining that bread baked on Wednesdays should not be eaten on Thursdays. Some old wives' tale claims the bread loses its virtue after a day. You try a bite anyway. Tastes fine, but you keep the story in mind. At midday, you join the village near the old oak tree for a curious event. It's the annual Wednesday knot ritual, where villagers tie strips of cloth and twine to the branches, each knot representing a promise or wish made on this sacred day. The tree is a riot of colors and textures, a patchwork quilt of hope, superstition, and faith. Some knots are simple, a wish for good health or a bountiful harvest. Others are cryptic, a folded piece of paper tucked inside a blue cloth, the writing long faded. A few knots jingle softly with the addition of tiny bells or tokens, a sheep's tooth, a carved wooden charm. The ritual may seem quaint now, but in its day, it was a powerful symbol of binding intention to the world. The belief was that promises tied to the tree on Wednesday had a life of their own, growing roots as deep as the branches. You pause to tie your own knot, an old scrap of linen you've carried for weeks. You whisper a wish, something simple yet hopeful, then pull the knot tight. The cloth flutters in the gentle breeze, joining countless others swaying silently in the afternoon light. As dusk approaches, the village gathers for a more shadowy tradition, the Wednesday watch. The old watchman, a stooped figure with eyes like lanterns, patrols the streets, proclaiming that no falsehood made on Wednesday shall go unpunished. It's a mixture of warning and ritual, a reminder that words spoken that day carry weight far beyond ordinary chatter. You watch the procession with a sense of unease and wonder. The medieval mind wasn't lighthearted about Wednesday. It was the day when the world expected you to stand tall, speak true, and honor your word, even if it meant invoking old gods or facing spectral justice. Historians still debate how much power these Wednesday superstitions actually held in everyday life. Were they tools of social control, moral reinforcement, or just old stories told to scare children? You decide it doesn't matter. The feeling of Wednesday still lingers, a day where your word is your bond, and the past and future twist together in a knot as strong as those tied on the ancient oak. You turn toward home, the sky a deepening purple, your knot still fluttering gently in the breeze. Tomorrow will bring new worries, new superstitions, but tonight is for promises kept and whispered secrets. You awake on Thursday, rubbing the sleep from your eyes as a soft dawn light filters through the shutters. There's a subtle shift in the air today, a feeling almost like the world itself is sighing. It's the day the medievals called Thorsday, named after the thunder god Thor, who wasn't just a brawny warrior, but also a protector against chaos and deceit. This day carried a peculiar reputation, a day for truth, but also a day shadowed by strange warnings about mirrors, reflections, and mysterious disappearances. You dress slowly, noticing your reflection in the polished basin of water. Oddly, some believed on Thursdays reflections could become traps for the soul if you weren't careful. Folk whispered about Thursday's mirror curse, a superstition that your image might linger longer than you intended, wandering off to places you'd never visit yourself. You catch a glimpse of your face, and for a moment it seems to hesitate, like it's unsure whether to follow you or stay put. Heading outside, the village seems quieter than usual. You overhear a group of women chatting about lost shadows and the curious cases of people who vanished after looking too long into reflective surfaces on a Thursday. One elderly woman recounts how her great-uncle's shadow didn't return home one evening, only to be found days later stuck to a blacksmith's anvil, stiff and unmoving. You can't help but imagine your own shadow wandering off on some mysterious errand. But Thursday was not just about spooky reflections. It was also the day when contracts and promises made on Wednesday were expected to be fulfilled, or else face consequences. Traders arrived from neighboring villages, their wagons laden with goods, and the air was filled with a curious mix of hope and anxiety. Merchants would not make deals lightly on Thursdays, knowing that a promise made a day earlier now demanded truth and action. In the marketplace, you spot a peculiar sight: a man selling truth-telling stones. These were smooth, palm-sized pebbles said to compel honesty when held during disputes. People bought them as talismans to guard against lies in negotiations or arguments. You pick one up, feeling its cool surface and wondering if the stone truly holds power, or if it's just another medieval quirk. Historians still debate the origin of this truth stone belief. Some suggest it was inspired by ancient pagan rites, while others think it was simply a clever marketing ploy by crafty merchants exploiting Thursday's serious reputation. As the sun climbs higher, you stroll by the village healer's hut, where strange remedies are being prepared. The healer warns against using any metal tools on Thursdays, believing that iron could cut a person's luck or sever the thread of their fate. Instead, herbal infusions and wooden implements rule the day. You watch as she carefully crushes lavender and rue, whispering incantations to ward off misfortune. One local ritual intrigues you most: Thursday's breath. Villagers would gather at twilight to breathe in the cool evening air deeply, believing that the wind on Thursdays carried whispers from the gods and could clear the mind of falsehoods and confusion. You join them, inhaling slowly, feeling a faint chill and a sudden clarity settle over your thoughts. Yet, Thursday held darker undertones as well. There was the quiet fear of Thursday disappearances, peculiar vanishings that seemed to cluster on this day in some regions. People speculated that the veil between the living world and the spirit realm thinned just enough to let certain souls slip through, never to return. A mother's lament echoed softly in your ears, recalling her lost son who disappeared one Thursday evening, leaving only a single glove behind. You ponder these tales, caught between skepticism and wonder. Were these stories born from real events, or were they poetic attempts to explain the unexplainable? The line remains blurred, and historians still argue whether these disappearances were actual events or the product of folklore entwined with grief and superstition. As evening falls, you find yourself at the village inn, where a bard quietly strums a lute, singing songs of gods, storms, and the fragile nature of promises. The gentle melody blends with the flickering firelight, weaving a tapestry of sound that feels both ancient and soothing. You sip your ale thoughtfully, reflecting on Thursday's strange mix of truth, shadows, and disappearing souls. Tomorrow promises new rituals, new superstitions, and the steady march of the week toward its quiet end. The dawn breaks softly on Friday, a day shrouded in a different kind of mystique, one that mingles hope with caution and simple chores with secret rituals. You awaken to the gentle clatter of chickens and the low murmur of villagers beginning their day. Yet Friday carries an undercurrent of superstition that clings to the morning mist like dew on grass. Known as Frigg's Day, after the Norse goddess of love and destiny, Friday was thought to be a day when the threads of fate were especially malleable. You hear whispers that anything begun on a Friday could flourish or falter spectacularly. The villagers' routines seem to move slower, as if each step is measured to avoid tempting fate. You find yourself outside, where the baker is kneading dough with extra care. Bread baked on a Friday was believed to bring good fortune, but only if the oven had been blessed the night before with a pinch of salt and a whispered prayer. The baker shares a curious tale. Centuries ago, a village near here baked bread every Friday using a secret mix of herbs thought to summon blessings of fertility and peace. People traveled miles just to taste those loaves. As you wander further, you notice the village smith hesitating before lighting his forge. An old superstition holds that striking an anvil on a Friday could summon lightning, a dangerous gamble with the elements. Instead, the smith chooses to sharpen tools quietly, humming a tune meant to soothe the spirits of fire and air. At the market, you overhear a discussion about Friday's breath, not the wind this time, but the peculiar belief that anything handled with bare hands on this day carried a special energy. Merchants wore gloves when exchanging coins, wary of accidental curses or blessings slipping from one palm to another. The idea of transferred fate sounds oddly like something out of a fairy tale, yet you sense a seriousness beneath the humor. You stroll past a quiet garden where a group of women is gathering herbs. They explain that Friday is prime time to collect certain plants, especially those used in love potions and calming teas. They swear by the power of Friday's dew, the first drops of morning moisture said to hold magical properties. You dip your fingers into a leaf damp with dew and feel a cool tickle. Later, you visit the apothecary, where jars of curious remedies line the shelves. Today, the apothecary mixes a concoction called Friday's Whisper, a blend of lavender, valerian, and something rarer, comfrey. This potion, she says, is meant to ease worries and invite peaceful dreams, a fitting preparation for the evening ahead. Yet Friday also carried warnings. Some feared the day's unpredictable luck, so much so that knights refused to start battles on Fridays, and sailors wouldn't set sail. You hear a story about a 14th-century mariner who ignored these warnings, only to be caught in a sudden storm that sank his ship without a trace. Historians still argue whether these beliefs truly saved lives or simply gave people a way to explain the whims of weather and fate. As twilight descends, the village gathers by the hearth for Friday's tale, a ritual storytelling meant to untangle the day's tensions. You listen as the old storyteller weaves a yarn about a lover's secret kept safe by the power of Friday's night, the flames flickering like tiny guardians. Your eyes grow heavy, the soft crackle of fire and gentle voices lulling you toward rest. You wonder about the fine line between chance and destiny that Fridays seem to straddle, and whether, perhaps, just a little belief in fate's gentle hand makes life a bit more bearable. The weekend dawns slow and steady with Saturday, the day named after Saturn, the ancient Roman god of plenty and time. You wake to the soft glow of morning light filtering through worn linen curtains, the air carrying a faint scent of wood smoke and fresh earth from the village gardens. Saturday is a day that feels different. neither burdened by superstition nor marked by strict routine, but rather a gentle pause, a brief reprieve to reset before the week begins anew. You wander outside to find the villagers already stirring, some preparing for the market, others tending to animals with careful hands. Saturday was often the day for community chores, a chance for neighbors to gather and share stories while working. Yet, beneath this sense of fellowship lies an intriguing tension. Saturday was also believed to hold a peculiar kind of power over time itself. Some claimed that tasks begun on this day unfolded at their own pace, neither rushed nor delayed, as if the universe took a breath and allowed things to be. At the communal well, you hear the faint murmur of a woman reciting an old rhyme while drawing water. The verse speaks of Saturn's patience, a magical quality that supposedly blessed those who moved carefully and with respect on Saturdays. According to folklore, rushing or cutting corners could anger the god and cause delays that lasted weeks or months. This belief lingered long enough to shape how people planned their week. Saturday was sacred for slow, deliberate effort. You approach the blacksmith again, now busily repairing tools in the mild morning light. Unlike Friday, the smith welcomes Saturday's calm energy, often choosing this day to finish delicate work requiring steady hands. There's a story passed down about how Saturn himself taught the first blacksmiths the virtue of patience, gifting the slow burn of the forge's fire as a metaphor for careful craftsmanship. Nearby, children play a game with small carved wooden discs, an ancient pastime thought to have origins in Saturnalia, the Roman festival honoring Saturn. The laughter feels timeless, a bridge between centuries of joy and simple fun. You watch as an old man smiles, recalling his own childhood days when the whole village celebrated Saturnalia with feasting and role reversals, masters serving slaves, the usual order upended for a brief taste of freedom and folly. Historians still argue whether such festivals truly relaxed social hierarchies or simply reinforced them in disguise. The village healer is busy preparing poultices with herbs gathered over the week. You learn that Saturdays were often reserved for medicinal treatments, believed to be most effective if applied on this day. The healer shows you a faded manuscript describing Saturn's salve, a remedy said to calm aches by harnessing the god's slow, steady influence. She admits with a soft chuckle that many treatments likely worked more because of the care put into them than any divine intervention. As afternoon stretches lazily onward, you find yourself drawn to the bakery once more. This time, the scent of honey and spices fills the air, the bakers crafting breads and pastries meant to celebrate the end of the work week. Saturday treats were simple pleasures, little rituals of comfort and reward, grounding the village in warmth and sweetness. As evening falls, the villagers gather again around the hearth, sharing stories and soft songs. The mood is light but thoughtful, a quiet reminder that time, like the day itself, can slow down and soothe. You feel the gentle rhythm of Saturday's blessing, the slow unfolding of moments, the patient crafting of life's details. Lying down to rest, the sense of calm lingers, wrapping around you like a warm blanket. You realize that maybe, just maybe, Saturday's magic lies in giving yourself permission to slow down, to breathe, and to simply be. You awake to Sunday's soft light spilling through the window, a day wrapped in quiet reverence and the promise of rest. Sunday, named after the sun itself, shines as the grand finale of the medieval week, a day to pause and reflect. Unlike Monday's harsh warnings or Friday's frenetic rush, Sunday carries a slow, soothing energy, though it too hides curious beliefs beneath its calm surface. In the village, you notice doors firmly shut and shops closed, the marketplace silent except for a few lingering scents of fresh bread and herbs. Sunday was sacred, a day reserved for worship, family, and rest. You hear a faint chant drifting from the village chapel, where villagers gather in candle-lit pews to honor the divine. The rhythm of the hymns seems designed not just to praise but to lull the mind into peaceful meditation. Yet Sunday's role wasn't just spiritual, it was also practical. The day offered a structured pause from labor, but many believed it held subtle dangers for those who ignored its rules. You overhear a tale from a local elder about the Sunday shadow, a mysterious chill that supposedly followed those who worked or traveled on this day, bringing fatigue or misfortune. Folklore said the sun itself withdrew its favor, leaving the unwary vulnerable to accidents or illness. In the village kitchen, the scent of roasting meat and slow-cooked stews fills the air. Sunday meals were a chance to savor the week's best ingredients, a communal reward for hard work. Interestingly, some medieval cooks believed that food prepared on Sunday had a special quality, thought to nourish both body and soul more deeply. Recipes passed down through generations often included instructions to bless the pot or stir in silence, rituals that sound almost like spells. You wander to the town square, where a slow procession of villagers carry small bouquets of herbs and flowers. These were traditionally blessed by the clergy and kept in homes to ward off illness and bad luck. Historians still argue whether this practice was purely symbolic or if the plant's natural properties genuinely helped medieval health. Either way, it highlights how Sunday blended faith with practical care. Later, you join a quiet conversation about the curious custom of Sunday shoes. These were the finest footwear saved for church visits, sometimes polished so brightly they gleamed like mirrors. Wearing the right shoes was believed to protect one from Sunday spirits, elusive creatures said to roam between worlds on this holy day. The idea feels a bit like medieval insurance for your feet, softly amusing but telling of deeper anxieties about safety and sanctity. As the sun dips low, villagers settle by their hearths, the warmth and flickering light drawing families close. Sunday's gentle hush feels like a balm, the world pausing just enough to catch its breath before Monday's looming shadow. You tuck yourself in, carrying the day's slow rhythm into dreams, a quiet reminder that even rest can hold secrets worth pondering. Monday arrives like a sudden chill, its reputation preceding it like a whispered warning. You step outside and feel a faint unease in the air, as if the day itself is watching, waiting. To medieval minds, Monday wasn't just the start of the work week. It was a day charged with peril, a time when the veil between safety and misfortune thinned dangerously. The phrase Monday blues would be an understatement. Some believed Monday could literally end your life. You wander through the village market, noticing hushed conversations about Monday madness, a curious term referring to sudden illnesses and accidents that seem to spike precisely on this day. Farmers joked nervously that the soil itself was reluctant to be disturbed, as if nature conspired with the cosmos to punish those who tried. Even the livestock seemed more skittish, adding to the day's unsettled mood. One odd belief stood out. Medieval folk thought that water drawn on a Monday carried a strange energy, too cold, too unpredictable, making it dangerous to drink or wash with. You imagine villagers gingerly dipping their buckets into wells, wary of the liquid's supposed mood swings. This led to a curious hygiene practice where some would avoid bathing entirely on Monday, believing it invited weakness or even death. Meanwhile, a more fringe tale tells of the Monday menace, a spectral figure blamed for sudden falls and injuries. Described vaguely as a shadow slipping between the corners of vision, this ghostly presence was said to strike those who ignored Monday's warnings, leaving a trail of broken bones and bad luck. Historians still debate whether such stories were mere superstition or reflections of real patterns in medieval life, like the increased risk of accidents after a weekend's rest. You pass a small apothecary where remedies to ward off Monday's curse are sold. Mixtures of herbs like rosemary and lavender, combined with prayers whispered over the potion. The apothecary's shelves are cluttered with strange bottles labeled Monday's Guard or Life's Return, promising protection through scent and ritual. The blending of medicine and magic feels natural here, a gentle echo of the era's blurred lines between science and superstition. Later, you find yourself inside a dimly lit tavern, where villagers share weary smiles and tales of narrowly avoided Monday disasters. They speak of slow starts, where even the strongest felt a heaviness in their limbs, a reluctance to face the day. It's a mood you know well, except theirs was intertwined with genuine fear, not just fatigue. This shared anxiety creates a curious communal bond, a reminder that even dread can bring people together. As evening falls, you reflect on Monday's odd power, a day both feared and endured, marking the fragile balance between life's rhythms and the unknown forces people felt pressing close. You realize that while modern calendars treat Monday lightly, medieval hearts beat with a quiet respect, and maybe a touch of terror for the day's shadow. Tuesday dawns with a different kind of promise. A day named after the Norse god Tyr, associated with courage and battle. You wake feeling a faint thrill in the air, as if the day invites you to face challenges head-on, a contrast to Monday's oppressive caution. In medieval times, Tuesday was seen as a day for action, for decisions, and for confronting whatever fate might throw your way. You walk through the village and notice blacksmiths already at work, their hammers ringing steady rhythms on glowing metal. Tuesday was a favored day for forging weapons and armor, the energy of the god Tyr thought to bless such efforts. There's a subtle intensity to the air, a charged sense of purpose that you can almost hear humming beneath the ordinary sounds of the morning. Curiously, some villagers believed Tuesday was the best day to begin risky ventures, from planting certain crops to embarking on journeys. It was as if the day itself lent strength and bravery to those willing to step into the unknown. Yet, this came with a whisper of caution, too. It was said that while Tuesday could empower, it also carried a stubborn streak. Missteps made this day might lead to stubborn problems that lingered longer than usual. In a quiet corner of the village square, you overhear a discussion about Tuesday's trials, peculiar rites where young men were tested for bravery through awkward or challenging tasks. One tale involves a boy who had to walk barefoot across a field scattered with prickly thistles, his success celebrated as a sign he'd earned the gods' favor for the rest of the week. Historians still debate how widespread such rituals truly were, or if they've grown exaggerated in the retelling. You stop by a healer's stall where tinctures and poultices are labeled Tuesday's Strength and Bravery Brew. The healer explains that these remedies often included bitter herbs like wormwood and rue, intended to toughen both body and spirit. The idea that a day could influence health so directly may sound odd now, but for medieval folk, the cosmos and the calendar danced closely together. Later, you visit the local scribe's shop, where letters and contracts are carefully dated on this brave Tuesday. Business dealings were often timed to coincide with the day's bold reputation, hoping that ventures signed under Tyr's watch would succeed. Yet there's a faint irony here. Just as many whispered that a rash move on Tuesday could backfire spectacularly. As twilight settles, you reflect on Tuesday's unique character, part inspiring call to arms, part subtle warning. It's a day where courage is prized, but must be tempered with care, a delicate balance that feels surprisingly modern. You tuck yourself in, feeling a little braver already, ready to drift off with images of ringing hammers and youthful trials echoing in your mind. Wednesday creeps in with a curious air of mystery. Named for Woden, the chief god of wisdom and magic, the day felt like a quiet crossroads, halfway through the week and full of subtle omens. You find yourself walking through fog-draped fields where whispers of enchantment seem to cling to the damp grass. To medieval minds, Wednesday was a day thick with potential, but also unpredictability. Villagers believed that whatever happened on Wednesday had a way of echoing through the rest of the week. It was called the pivot day, a time when fortunes might turn, for better or worse. Some folks treated it like a gamble, carefully watching the sky for signs in clouds or birds' flight patterns. You overhear an old woman muttering about the Woden's Watch, a folk belief that invisible spirits roamed freely on this day, observing human behavior and deciding who would be favored. One particularly odd custom you learn about is the Wednesday Whisper, where people would quietly confess small worries or secrets to the wind, hoping to shed their burdens before the week's second half. This practice seems oddly soothing, a medieval version of airing your anxieties, though perhaps a little less private than modern therapy. Historians still argue whether such customs were widely practiced or mostly local traditions passed down through generations. In the village square, a peculiar market unfolds where traders display strange talismans and charms meant specifically for Wednesday protection. One catches your eye, a small, carved wooden owl, believed to carry Woden's wisdom and guard the bearer from midweek misfortune. You imagine these trinkets jangling softly on belts and around necks, little reminders of unseen watchers. Meanwhile, a subtle health belief lingers. It was thought that wounds incurred on Wednesday healed slower, possibly because the day's mystical forces distracted the body's natural rhythms. This led to advice that risky tasks and dangerous journeys should be avoided, or at least taken with extra care, on this strangely potent day. As the afternoon sun filters through the trees, you find yourself caught in a moment of quiet reflection, sensing the blend of fear, hope, and ritual that painted Wednesdays in medieval hearts. This day, balanced delicately between dread and possibility, holds its secrets close, inviting you to ponder the invisible threads linking time, fate, and human experience. Thursday arrives with the booming presence of Thor, god of thunder and storms. You step outside just as a distant rumble rolls across the skies, the air thick with electricity and expectation. In medieval times, Thursday was a day charged with power, a time for bold moves and thunderous decisions. The villagers trusted Thor's might to protect them from harm, but also feared the day's potential for sudden upheaval. You watch as farmers perform rituals by their fields, offering small tokens or prayers to secure Thor's favor and guard against lightning strikes. There's a comforting rhythm to these ceremonies, a tactile connection to nature's forces that feels oddly grounding as you observe it now. The sound of wooden hammers tapping ritual stones blends with the soft cluck of hens pecking nearby. Curiously, some believed that Thursday was the best day to settle disputes or make important agreements, relying on Thor's sense of justice to keep deals honest. Yet, others warned that impulsive anger was especially dangerous on this day, as it could escalate quickly like a summer storm. It's a delicate balance between strength and restraint that echoes in modern workplace advice. Think before you thunder. you muse quietly. A local healer shows you a rare recipe called Thor's Thunder Tonic, a bitter brew of herbs like yarrow and nettle meant to invigorate the spirit and ward off gloom. You can almost taste the sharp earthiness, a potion brewed to channel the day's raw energy and turn it to good use. Historians still debate whether such concoctions were common remedies or symbolic gestures layered with superstition. In the town square, you notice a curious tradition, a thunder dance, where villagers mimic the gods' mighty hammer strikes with rhythmic stomps and claps. It's less about performance and more a shared moment of communal energy, a way to connect with Thor's might and dispel any lurking fears of the storm. As the sky darkens with gathering clouds, you settle into the comforting idea that Thursday, with all its noise and power, offers a chance to harness strength wisely. You imagine yourself as part of that ancient dance, feet steady, heart calm, ready to face whatever thunder comes next. Friday dawns soft and slow, like a sigh after a long day. Named for Frigg or Freya, goddesses of love and beauty, this day carried a gentler, almost tender energy. You step into a quiet village where the scent of fresh bread and blooming herbs mingles in the cool morning air. Friday was a day for connection, between people, between heart and home, and between the earthly and the divine. You overhear women preparing garlands of flowers and weaving delicate ribbons into their hair, rituals to invite blessings of fertility and happiness. The day's pace feels unhurried, as if time itself pauses to appreciate the simple joys of companionship and rest. You can almost hear the laughter spilling from kitchens and courtyards, the soft hum of daily life wrapped in a gentle lullaby. Yet beneath this calm surface there's an intriguing belief that any quarrels or harsh words spoken on Friday would linger like a shadow over the weekend. So folks took great care to smooth tensions early, often sharing small gifts or apologies to keep peace. This idea of Friday harmony is oddly reminiscent of modern weekend family dinners, where effort goes into setting aside conflicts. An unexpected tradition catches your eye. Friday was sometimes called washing day, not just for laundry, but for spiritual cleansing. People believed that bathing on this day could wash away bad luck and emotional burdens, preparing them for the week's end. You imagine the steam rising from wooden tubs, the scent of rosemary and lavender filling the air, a comforting ritual that still resonates today. Historians still debate whether Friday's reputation for romance and rest was truly widespread or mostly a poetic ideal shaped by later storytellers. Either way, the day feels like a balm, a deliberate pause to savor beauty and kindness in a world often too rushed. As twilight falls, you find yourself breathing easier, warmed by the simple yet profound customs that made Friday a day to cherish and protect, a gentle promise of renewal and grace. Saturday ambles in with a curious mix of work and whimsy. You stroll into a bustling medieval market, where the aroma of freshly baked bread mingles with the tang of smoked fish and spilled ale. Named after Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture and time, Saturday carried with it an air of measured productivity, a final chance to prepare before the week's cycle began anew. Locals bustle about, finishing chores, selling wares, and sneaking moments of leisure. What's fascinating is how Saturday was seen as both a sacred and practical day. People believed that work done on this day would be blessed by Saturn himself, ensuring abundance and protection. So, the rhythm of labor mixed with a quiet reverence that kept the day from feeling too frantic. You notice some peculiar customs. In certain regions, Saturday night was reserved for what they called the Feast of Shadows, a low-key gathering where villagers shared stories of ancestors and whispered hopes for the future. These tales were accompanied by simple music and the flicker of candlelight, a soothing ritual that helped ease anxieties about the unknown. It's almost like a medieval version of today's wind-down routines before bedtime. Interestingly, some believed Saturday was the ideal day to visit the sick or lonely, because Saturn's influence was thought to bring healing and comfort. You imagine quiet homes filled with soft voices and the gentle clinking of cups as neighbors offer companionship. Historians still debate how widespread these caring practices were, or if they mainly belonged to small pockets of close-knit communities. One quirky superstition you encounter is that haircuts taken on Saturday would grow back thicker and stronger, a belief likely born from the hope that tending to oneself on this day invited nature's renewal. You can almost picture a rustic barber's shop, scissors snipping amid friendly chatter, the scent of herbs mingling with fresh hay. As dusk falls, you settle by a fire, feeling the slow pulse of Saturday's steady beat, the perfect balance of productivity and pause, wrapping up the week with intention and gentle care. Sunday drifts in like a whispered promise, soft sunlight filtering through stained glass and the faint scent of beeswax candles. Known as the Lord's Day in Christian Europe, Sunday was a day unlike any other, a time for rest, reflection, and communal gathering. You find yourself amid a sleepy village preparing for Mass, the muted murmur of prayers blending with birdsong outside the stone church walls. For many, Sunday was the apex of the week's rhythm, a day of sacred pause and social connection. People dressed in their finest, their breath visible in the crisp morning air, sharing quiet greetings before entering the sanctuary. Yet, Sunday's hold extended beyond the church. It was a day when village laws forbade work and even trading, an enforced calm that gave everyone permission to slow down fully. What surprises you is the variety of Sunday customs across regions. In some places, the day was sprinkled with light-hearted contests like archery matches or storytelling contests after Mass, turning the solemn day into one of communal joy and friendly rivalry. Imagine the tired faces brightening at these moments, the laughter weaving through the cooling air like a gentle spell. A fringe belief also survives about Sundays. Some thought that illnesses contracted on this day were more severe, which may explain why sick folks often hid their symptoms or delayed seeking help until Monday. This odd stigma created a strange dynamic where care was both prioritized and postponed, a paradox historians still puzzle over. You also uncover that in certain Celtic traditions, Sunday nights were seen as liminal, a time when the veil between the living and the spirit world thinned. People left out small offerings of bread or milk to honor ancestors, a gentle acknowledgement of unseen company as the week closed. The soothing rituals, the mingling of reverence and recreation, all conspire to make Sunday feel like a soft landing, a pause to breathe deeply before the inevitable march of time begins again. Monday arrives with an edge of dread, like the first chill of autumn brushing your skin. The very name carried weight in medieval minds. Not just the start of the work week, but a day rumored to harbor hidden dangers. You might wonder how a simple day earned such a reputation, but step quietly into a medieval village and you begin to understand the lingering unease. Medieval people truly believed Monday could literally kill you, or at least put you in grave danger. The idea wasn't just a passing superstition, but a pervasive cultural caution rooted in a blend of religious teachings, folk beliefs, and everyday hardships. For instance, doctors of the time warned against starting new treatments or surgeries on Mondays, fearing that the body's humors were out of balance after the weekend's indulgences. You stroll past the blacksmith's forge and overhear talk of Monday's curse, a notion that accidents, illnesses, and misfortunes peaked as the week began. Merchants were wary of signing contracts or beginning journeys, convinced that any misstep on Monday could spiral into disaster. This belief shaped everything from farming schedules to courtroom appointments. What's more, some medieval texts hinted that Monday's deadly reputation might be linked to the moon cycle, the word Monday itself deriving from moon's day. Because the moon was associated with changeability and madness, Monday was thought to stir restless spirits and unstable moods. You can almost picture a farmer hesitating to set foot in his fields, worried that the moon's pull might turn his livestock skittish or his crops sour. Historians still argue whether Monday's bad rap was mostly a psychological effect born from early workweek stress or a genuine reflection of risks tied to timing. The truth probably sits somewhere in the middle, wrapped in layers of cultural storytelling and lived experience. A quirky fringe belief adds that wearing certain colors, like red or green, on Monday might ward off the day's lethal tendencies, though you'd likely just stand out at market. You smile, imagining a crowd of villagers in their Monday armor, not swords, but scarlet cloaks and emerald scarves. As Monday's shadows lengthen, you feel the lingering echo of a world where a day's name carried enough power to influence survival itself. Tuesday arrives with a curious shift in atmosphere, less fear than Monday, yet not quite the ease of Sunday. You walk through the cobblestone streets and hear tales that Tuesday was considered the most unlucky day for marriages and legal matters. Why? The medieval mind linked it to Mars, the god of war, whose influence was believed to stir conflict and misfortune. You imagine a young couple postponing their wedding, glancing nervously at the calendar as neighbors whisper warnings. Legal disputes, too, were often delayed to avoid Tuesday's supposed wrath, with scribes and judges eyeing the day with suspicion. This day seemed to harbor an undercurrent of tension, the kind that made people hold their breath and tread lightly. However, there were exceptions. Some traditions suggested Tuesday was perfect for healing rituals or exorcisms, perhaps as a way to harness Mars's fierce energy against evil spirits. You can almost hear the whispered prayers and see the flicker of candles in darkened rooms where ancient rites were performed. Interestingly, historians still debate whether these Tuesday taboos were more regional superstition or widely accepted doctrine, with evidence varying across Europe's patchwork of cultures. The complexity hints at a world where days of the week were entwined with astrology, religion, and practical concerns in a delicate dance. A particularly quirky detail comes from England, where a 14th century text recommended carrying a sprig of rosemary on Tuesday to protect oneself from bad luck and quarrels. You chuckle at the image of villagers bustling about, clutching their herb bundles like charms against a grumpy god. By evening, as the sun dips low, Tuesday's strange reputation lingers like a faint echo, a reminder of how much meaning was packed into the fabric of everyday life, even in the days that followed the dreaded Monday. As Wednesday dawns, you step into a day that was often seen as a quiet pivot point in the medieval week, a day less burdened by the doom-laden whispers of Monday and Tuesday, yet still wrapped in layers of meaning and ritual. Unlike its more notorious neighbors, Wednesday carried a mix of practical significance and subtle superstition, with roots tracing back to Mercury, the messenger god, who was thought to influence communication and travel. You imagine a bustling market town where merchants and travelers greet Wednesday with cautious optimism. It was the day when deals might finally be struck, letters dispatched, and journeys set in motion. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some believed that starting new ventures on Wednesday required a touch of ritual, a whispered prayer, a sprinkle of salt, to keep the fickle god Mercury on one side. A particularly odd medieval practice involved Wednesday's fasting, observed by some as a way to cleanse the body and spirit midweek. You picture villagers quietly abstaining from certain foods, while monks chant softly in stone cloisters, all in hopes of realigning their humors and warding off illness. Historians still argue whether these fasting customs were primarily spiritual or driven by practical considerations, like food scarcity. Another curious tidbit: midwives and healers often chose Wednesday for attending births or performing delicate procedures, trusting that Mercury's swift and clever nature would guide a safe delivery or successful cure. The idea that a god could influence such personal moments brings a human warmth to the day, amidst the faint scent of herbs and candle wax. As twilight deepens, you feel the gentle rhythm of Wednesday settle in, a day quietly holding the balance between the week's fears and hopes, its ordinary magic weaving through the hum of daily life. You're reminded once again how the medieval mind spun rich stories around even the smallest pieces of time, crafting a tapestry where every moment mattered. Now, as the night enfolds you, think back to the journey through these haunted, hopeful, and oddly charming days. Each whispered warning, each curious custom, was a thread in a vast, shared human effort to make sense of the world, and to survive it one day at a time.